Hello, I'm Stephen Cole and welcome to Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, Brazil, but without the carnival. Brazil played host to one of the biggest events in the sporting calendar, the Football World Cup, just last month. The Cup was a success, but it didn't score with the economy. The result is Latin America's largest economy is in danger of slowing. And now a tragic death has reset the presidential election dynamic with only 2 months to go. On this week's show, we'll be talking to the head of emerging markets at Capital Economics about what's next for Brazil. Also this week, the race for one of the world's newest markets in telecoms took off in Myanmar. It's the first time in the country's history that access to the net via a mobile device may soon be more widely available. We'll be taking a look at the huge challenges involved with the CEO of Telenor's Asian operations. And spectacular views for sale on the island of Sicily. 20 empty properties have gone on sale on the market for just €1 each. It's all part of a bid to attract new investment to the area. But is there a catch? Well, sadly, earlier this month, a plane crash killed Brazil's Socialist Party presidential candidate Eduardo Campos. His death robbed Brazilian politics of one of its rising stars. Now, however, it's back to the campaign to see who will be the country's next president. So will the election trigger the reforms needed to revive what is effectively a moribund Brazilian economy? Gabriel Elizondo reports from the capital, Brasilia.
Eduardo Campos was considered the most business-friendly of all of the candidates running for president. He was a popular governor of the northeast state of Pernambuco, and that's a state that saw some of the biggest economic growth in the last decade. Campos was considered a young and very modern manager of the state's economy, and he was doing some very interesting things when he was governor. For example, he brought in a private education firm to help reform the state's middle schools, and it was that sort of eye towards technology and innovation that was catching the business community's attention, not only here in Brazil, but internationally as well. Actually, The Economist magazine wrote a glowing profile of Campos back in 2012. Now that Campos is off the political stage, the question becomes who will assume that role in this campaign, and I can tell you it's going to be opposition candidate Aécio Neves. He's been hitting incumbent President Dilma Rousseff very hard on the campaign trail about her management of the economy, and that really is Rousseff's biggest liability right now is the economy. Most people say that while Brazil has in the last decade lifted tens of millions of people out of extreme poverty into the middle class, and while unemployment remains very low here in Brazil, overall the economy is slowing under Dilma Rousseff's presidency. Most economists will credit it towards the burdensome and complicated tax structure here, as well as high inflation. But also during the boom years in this country, everybody was spending money, and now they're having to pay the bills. Personal debt has gone up here in Brazil, which is also causing people not to spend as much, which is making a retraction in the economy. But for Dilma Rousseff, it's going from bad to worse. We're told that most likely this year, economic growth is going to be less than 1%.
So the economy has become a central theme in the election amid warning signs that Latin America's largest economy could well be slipping into recession. And that's something that the current administration under President Dilma Rousseff is blaming on everything, from troubles in neighbouring Argentina to, indeed, the Soccer World Cup. Well, the hard fact is Brazil's economy ground to a near halt in the first quarter, expanding by just 0.2% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. Many economists are forecasting zero GDP growth in the second quarter, and that's despite hosting that World Cup in June and July, which in fact didn't really help the economy. Brazil also took a hit when neighbouring Argentina, a top consumer of Brazilian exports, reduced its purchases of cars and other durables as its own economy struggled this year. A prolonged drought helped to drive up food prices, so keeping inflation expectations anchored will require firm monetary policy action, at least according to the OECD. Well, I'm joined from London now by Neil Shearing, the Chief Emerging Markets Economist at Capital Economics. The whole world, Neil, was watching Brazil for that World Cup. It was a lot of fun, a lot of carnival, a lot of action. But I wonder what kind of impact hosting a World Cup like that might have had on the economy. Did it in fact boost the economy, do you think?
Well, the consensus view, if you like, is that it should have done. It should have been a big positive for Brazil's economy. And there are some ways in which it may have been. In particular, investment in the run-up to the World Cup would have improved Brazil's capital stock and alleviated, to some extent, some of the problems that I was talking about earlier. But the sums we're talking about are trivial in the context of a $2 trillion economy. And a lot of the investment that went in was into things like stadia, which frankly is going to have no lasting impact on Brazil's growth potential. What's more, during the World Cup, okay, we saw an influx of tourists, but the numbers that we're talking about in terms of overall consumption, again, are trivial in the context of a $2 trillion economy. And bear in mind too that there were public holidays in some of the cities hosting World Cup games when Brazil was playing. So factories shut down, shops closed, economic activity suffered as a result. So I think the net result of all of this may be that actually the impact on the economy is negligible.
How important is structural reform to the next administration?
It's incredibly important, and I think this is going to be the acid test of the government that comes out of October's elections. Can they progress a radical, wholesale structural reform programme? Because that's what's now needed in order to get growth going again. Under the present administration, we've seen lots of tinkering and fiddling around the edges, particularly with regards to the tax system, some efforts to try and get public investment up, but frankly, these don't really amount to much. What we need to see is a wholesale reform programme aimed at raising domestic savings, welfare reform, tax reform, raising investment rates, attracting foreign direct investment, stimulating a vibrant manufacturing and industrial base, trying to wean Brazil's dependence off of credit and commodity fuel growth. All of that's going to be very difficult to do. And I think the best chance is probably if we see a change of government, but let's wait and see how the political landscape looks after October's elections. We know that the optimistic case is we know that from history in emerging markets that elections do often prove to be the trigger for change, either within a government or as a result of a change of government. So we have to really wait and see what the political landscape looks like after October.
Well, Neil, thanks very much for that. I know your team didn't win the World Cup, but thanks for joining us this week on Counting the Cost. We're going to stay in Latin America and go to Venezuela, where the government has started to move people from a half-built tower block in the capital, Caracas. The unfinished structure, which has become famous for its apocalyptic image, was abandoned during the banking crisis in the 1990s. Lucia Newman has this report.
Downtown Caracas is a concrete jungle where, smack in the middle, stands a 45-story building nicknamed the Tower of David, after the man who conceived of what was to be a modern financial center. Instead, it has become known as the world's largest vertical slum, a last resort for more than 1,100 homeless families who 7 years ago took over the unfinished building abandoned during a financial crisis in the 1990s. These open squares mark where the lifts would have been. Residents must walk up to the 28th floor carrying everything from gas canisters to bricks.
There was nothing here. We built 2 rooms, then another room on top. We made the kitchen everything.
With no sewerage, running water or electricity, the community used its ingenuity to bring in utilities most people take for granted. Water is strictly rationed and stored in countless plastic containers. The building has been transformed into a well-organized community with its own laws, small shops, and even a factory that makes cookie cutters and employs 26 people. At first, the building turned into an epicenter for drug traffickers and kidnappers, but eventually the community organized and expelled them, turning this building actually into one of the safest neighborhoods in Caracas, but only safe from crime. The lack of hygiene, the precarious construction, and stairs with no railings make the tower a health hazard, especially for children. which is why the government has begun moving everyone out.
We were able to do this without any violence, in a harmonious way, by talking to the residents and their leaders to convince them to leave.
In the last month, nearly half of the 4,500 residents have been brought here, to a new low-income housing complex about an hour south of Caracas. It's a huge improvement, says Maricruz Mendez, who used to live on the 22nd floor.
Now I am on the ground floor. I have 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and running water. For me, this is paradise.
There are some who don't want to give up the comfort of living in the city near their friends and their jobs, but it's only a matter of time. While the government debates what to do with the concrete skeleton so many think of not just as their home, but as their community.
And still ahead on Counting the Cost. It's become a global phenomenon and so far has raised $23 million. We'll be taking a look at the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge that has participants pouring ice and freezing water over their heads, then challenging others to do the same. But it's all in a good cause. Myanmar has one of the worst telecommunication infrastructures in the world. Only about 5 to 10% of the population, in fact, owns a mobile phone. But the government is trying to change all that. From Yangon, Florence Louis explains.
These people are all part of a telecommunications revolution sweeping across Myanmar. The only way to get a SIM card used to be through a public lottery system or paying over $100 for it. Now, being able to buy one for just $1.50 has got people swarming into mobile phone shops.
We've been selling an average of 100 to 200 handsets on a daily basis.
For a long time, the telecommunications industry was monopolized by a state-owned enterprise. But the government has now allowed 2 foreign companies to operate. Tan Thik Ong is a taxi driver who's just bought his first mobile phone.
The reason I bought the phone is so that I can get taxi orders from customers and friends.
He hasn't quite learned how to use it though, and sometimes has trouble telling an incoming call from an outgoing one. But he says he wants to one day be able to surf the internet using his phone.
The boom in mobile phone sales also means more people will be able to access the internet. Some industry experts estimate that this is a country where only about 1% of the population go online. And a recent survey suggests that half of those who do use the internet do so through a mobile device.
But much more work needs to be done. There are only between 2,000 and 3,000 transmission towers. The country is going to need at least 10 times that number. Hampered by the infrastructure, the foreign-owned companies are only launching their services in 3 major cities, but aim to reach most of the population within 5 years. Still, many are optimistic.
There is just an exponential amount of businesses that are now possible with this new connectivity, going from e-health to e-money, and it's a very exciting time.
For Tan Thik Ong, the internet still seems a long way away. He's first got to master the basics of using his phone.
Joining me from Bangkok is Sigva Brekker from Telenor's operations in Asia. Tell us about the challenges of Myanmar, Sigva.
Telenor, we have been around in Asia for the last 18 years. We are operating in 5 neighboring markets, have 160 million customers. And for us, of course, to now have a chance to go into an absolutely new market, 60 million people, where very few of them have a mobile phone, that makes us really enthusiastic. However, we are also aware of the challenges, and we are going to use the experiences we have after these 18 years and actually make sure that we are addressing these challenges. And if I should name them, I think the main 3 challenges we see is related to infrastructure and land issues. The second one would be working conditions, and the third one would be to make sure that we are doing things in a very transparent way.
Well, certainly in regard to those challenges, there's a long road ahead. But how do you cope with the lack of infrastructure?
And I think there are two issues here. One is the lack of power. Only 30% of the country actually are powered with electricity. So here we need new type of solutions, like solar energy, for example. And we are prepared for that. We have launched such solutions also in neighboring markets. And the same would be when it comes to working condition, which was my second challenge. We know that there is lack of suppliers here. There is no towers here. There is lack of distribution. So we basically need to build things from scratch.
Let's continue with the theme of challenges. A hostile regulatory environment. How do you deal with that?
I will actually say that we have been positively surprised by the way the government has run the entire licensing process so far. It has been very open, very transparent. That's the reason why I think ourselves and Ooredoo finally won the right to operate in this country. I've also been surprised by the way they have come up with a telecom law and are now coming up with telecom regulations, including also establishing a regulator. So far, I will say that this has been a process which have used world-class experiences on how to do this. And the way we have seen it so far is that everything is based on a level playing field, equal treatment, and a real competition.
OK, well, so far, we've only really talked about the challenges you're facing. How much are you planning to invest and what returns are you expecting?
Well, we have said that we are going to invest around $1 billion. That's including the investment we also did to get the license. Then we will quickly trying to build a company which is self-funding. Funded, meaning going into black numbers as soon as possible. And we have done this before. And the strategy we have used in all the other five markets we are operating in neighboring markets to Myanmar, is to build a presence in the mass market. Our approach has always been that if we can make services affordable for the mass market customers, we can build volumes. And with volumes come scales, and with scales become profitability. And that's why we have decided to launch both 2G technology and 3G technology, such that we can bring both voice to everyone and internet to everyone. And that's going to be our approach. It's a recipe we have used in other markets. So I think we know pretty much how to operate in markets where the average customers could give you only $2 a month in revenues. And we have a cost base that we can make profitability out of that. On top of that, we are also going to make sure that not only we have services, but there also will be handsets available to the end consumers. And that's why we have chosen to go both with what you could call an older technology, which 2G is, and the newer technology with 3G, and which is support data.
But how do you go about making all of this affordable for the vast majority of your customers?
Well, as I already said, it's about building volumes. And that's why the mass market is important for us. And then it's about operational efficiency, really operating on a low-cost basis. This is what we have been doing in Bangladesh, which we have been doing in Pakistan, in India, in the mass market in India. And that's what our entire business plan also is built on. So in this case, we feel that we are quite prepared. And we think we are actually quite enthusiastic because we think there is a built-up demand with the customers in Myanmar, a real demand to actually leapfrog 10, 15, 20 years of telecom history, not to go from voice services via SMS and so on, but go right into the internet world from day one. So our business plan is built actually on a customer giving us $2 a month and still making money out of that.
Sigve Brekke, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and Microsoft founder Bill Gates and footballer Cristiano Ronaldo are amongst those who've taken part. The ALS Charity Ice Bucket Challenge has raised millions of dollars in donations since the campaign started in July. The intrepid John Terrett has this report from New York.
If you've been online in the last few weeks, there's a good chance you've seen someone taking the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. People dumping ice-cold water on their heads and nominating others to do the same. Too cold for you? Well, you can make a donation. ALS stands for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, after the baseball great who was diagnosed with it in the late 30s. It's a degenerative disease that kills off motor neurons, eventually ending the brain's ability to initiate and control muscles. Today, a viral campaign on the internet is again thrusting the fatal disease into the spotlight. According to the ALS Association, 15 new cases of ALS are diagnosed each day, and as many as 30,000 Americans have the disease at any given time. ALS affects 20% more men than women. The life expectancy of an ALS patient averages about 2 to 5 years after diagnosis. There's currently no cure, which is why money for research is so important. Ice bucket challenges are not new, but 29-year-old ALS patient Peter Freites, who can no longer talk or walk, decided to use it to call attention to the disease. He and a friend are responsible for launching this viral campaign and starting the sensation.
Before this, so many people just did not understand what ALS was.
JT here. I am accepting the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge.
Celebrities and politicians alike have all joined in the trend, and it's paying off. The ALS Association says that from July the 29th to August the 14th, its national and state chapters have seen nearly 146,000 new donors. They've raised $7.6 million, compared to $1.2 million in the same period last year.
The only way to do this is quickly, I'm told. Here we go! And this is why Al Jazeera reporters are always totally immersed in their stories.
Well done, John. So, who would you nominate to take the Ice Bucket Challenge? We'll show you how to get in touch at the end of the show. And finally, imagine buying your own elegant Italian villa in a charming location for just €1. And that's just a bit more than $1. Well, now you can. But as Claudio Lavanga reports from Sicily, there is, of course, a catch.
This is officially one of Italy's most beautiful medieval towns. Perched on a hill in the middle of Sicily, the village of Gangi boasts long-standing traditions and sprawling views of the idyllic countryside below. But even more appealing, perhaps, is the price of some of the houses on sale. €1, or just a little over $1. The town's mayor says there is a catch. If you buy one of these derelict properties, you will have to guarantee that you will restore it.
These are houses left behind by those who emigrated. Now we have people from India, China, England, France, and of course Italy interested in them. But even though they're being given away for free, the owners still need to pay for the restoration, and they're not allowed to bring in their own bricklayers. So it's also good for the local workforce.
Over 700 potential buyers have already expressed interest in the scheme. Among them are Dominic and Tavia, both Australians. They looked at a house left abandoned for years after their owners passed away. It's on the market for €1 and will take about $35,000 to restore.
You couldn't buy a car park in Australia for $35,000. For someone like me, this is an opportunity, I guess, to use some funds which might be more realistic to acquire a lifestyle and, hopefully to be able to create a place that I can share with friends and family.
If the scheme proves successful, other towns across Italy may follow Gangi's example and hope to rebuild their local economies one brick at a time.
And that is our show for this week. But there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/programmes. Don't forget to get in touch to let me know who you would like to have a bucket of cold water thrown over them, excluding me, of course, by tweeting @Cole_Stephen and by using the hashtag #CountingTheCost, or drop us an email countingthecost@aljazeera.net. That's our address, but that really is it from this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Stephen Cole from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.